The global labor market is undergoing a structural reconfiguration, and the data for the next 5 years is sharply divided. The World Economic Forum projects that by 2030, 92 million existing roles will be displaced, while 170 million new ones will emerge. On paper, this creates a net global surplus of 78 million jobs by the end of the decade. However, this growth projection exists alongside McKinsey data showing currently demonstrated technologies could automate 57% of U.S. work hours by that same date. Here is the central tension. We are forecasting a labor market that automates over half of its total work hours, while simultaneously adding tens of millions of people to the payroll. These two figures can only coexist if we look closer at the math. If the total volume of work hours is shrinking, but the number of workers is growing, then the job is no longer a monolithic block. To solve the paradox, we must look past the job title and examine the individual tasks. Modern workforce modeling now relies on task-level deconstruction. Artificial intelligence doesn't typically absorb entire occupations. It targets specific routine tasks. That 57% automation statistic applies to this granularity. It is a measure of theoretical task exposure, not total human redundancy. As routine processes are stripped away by software, the daily responsibilities and required skill sets of the human worker are forced to evolve. Forecasting the new economy requires mapping exactly where these automated tasks are going and identifying the entities that will take them over. By 2030, enterprise architecture will operate as an integrated hybrid environment, combining human and machine capabilities. This chart from McKinsey maps the future of work across two primary axes: activities requiring physical capabilities versus non-physical capabilities. The data isolates a 43% zone of total work hours that remains resistant to automation. This work relies on real-time situational awareness, empathy, complex interpersonal negotiation, and ethical judgment, capacities current technologies cannot replicate. The remaining 57% represents the automatable zone, which is split between two different types of technological interventions. Digital agents, software systems built to handle routine information processing and cognitive tasks, account for 44% of those hours. Physical robots, tasked with automating structured manual labor, account for the remaining 13%. Notice the specific overlap in the center. A significant portion of automatable domains still requires social and emotional skills to execute properly. Over 70% of the skills sought by employers today are required across both automatable and non-automatable work activities. The result is not a replacement mechanism, but a three-way partnership between people, agents, and robots. Making it function requires holistic workflow redesign. To determine if this exposure destroys a specific role or scales it, we apply a specific microeconomic mechanism. Using data models from Goldman Sachs, we contrast two highly exposed career paths: a routine administrative role on the left and a complex advisory role on the right. The administrative role faces substitution, occurring when AI entirely absorbs the worker's primary value-adding activity. When the core execution is substituted by software, companies contract their human capital, leading to lowered operating costs and fewer job postings. The advisory role faces augmentation. AI absorbs the foundational data synthesis, like processing lab results, but leaves the primary value add intact. This shift allows the human worker to scale their focus on edge cases, professional judgment, and direct client interaction. This table illustrates how human skills must pivot. In problem solving, as machines take over raw data analysis, human value shifts towards interpreting those findings and making judgments. In this model, humans do not generate the raw outputs. They orchestrate and evaluate the outputs generated by the AI. Instead of raw execution, the human worker now transitions from a simple data creator into a high-level data evaluator and decision maker. Automation exposure only triggers job loss if the specific role lacks the non-automatable tasks required to scale its value. This brings us to the engine driving the 78 million net job growth projection. The driver is a principle called demand expandability, a modern application of the Jevons paradox, which relies on the cost per unit of output. When AI augmentation hits a workflow, the worker's productivity scales up, altering the baseline math of the market. Whether generating a legal brief, drafting a marketing plan, or analyzing a medical scan, the exact cost to produce a single unit drops. As the cost drops, the broader market demand for that specific service expands. Organizations face a surge in volume, and they must respond to that market expansion. To capture that value, they are forced to hire humans to oversee, validate, and manage the scaled volume of machine outputs. This digital expansion also dictates a physical reality, the physicality premium. The digital AI boom is driving a counter-cyclical physical boom, requiring 500,000 net new jobs in the U.S. power sector alone to meet demand. Sustaining millions of cognitive agents requires a massive physical infrastructure of new data centers and high-voltage power grids expanding globally. The 78 million net new jobs exist because AI drops production costs, expanding demand so rapidly that the economy must scale its human capital to keep pace. The theoretical economics are clear, but the timeline dictates exactly how much time organizations have to adapt. MIT researchers have modeled the progression of AI capabilities over the decade. They classify this progression as a rising tide, a steady, predictable accumulation of capability rather than a sudden wave of disruption. As this tide moves forward, the trajectory points to 2029, where AI models are projected to achieve an 80 to 95% success rate on cognitive tasks. At that threshold, computational models will possess mastery over the majority of routine knowledge work. This rising tide leaves enterprise architects with a decisive 2 to 3 year window to restructure their operations before legacy business models fail. The integration of AI promises $2.9 trillion in annual economic value. That value will not be captured by organizations that treat AI merely as a software tool to cut headcount. By 2030, successful enterprise workflows will place human nodes as central conductors, orchestrating dozens of AI agent subroutines. Economic capture requires redesigning entire workflows from the ground up, moving humans away from routine execution. The future of human labor is rooted in high-level orchestration, ethical reasoning, and solving unstructured problems. The human worker becomes the orchestrator and the ethical anchor of complex automated systems. In the 2030 economy, the competitive advantage is not automated efficiency.